Hello again. Bernie Miklasz with you with another Bernie Miklasz show here on YouTube. It's our second of the day. Hey, that makes 2 days in a row where I've cranked out two videos for you. So just trying to be helpful. Probably talking too much. I'll try to keep this one a little shorter. Anyway, I wanted to talk to you today about the St. Louis Blues, who lost again last night on home ice to Minnesota. Minnesota's a heck of a team, but it doesn't really dismiss the reality of the situation. The Blues are getting worse and worse and worse. Uh, since October the 26th, they have the worst record in the league. If you go by points percentage, they're 3-8-1, a points percentage of 292. That ranks dead last in the NHL over that time. Also been outscored by 23 goals in those 12 games. So they're not really competitive. Here and there, not really competitive. They were pretty competitive last night against the Minnesota Wild, but they lost. So by losing last night, the Blues are now 1-5-1 in their last seven, and they've scored only 10 goals in the last 7 games, and that continues to be a problem, even with Robert Thomas returning against the Wild last night. And Thomas was on a line with Kyrou and Buchnevich, and they actually played very, very well. But despite all that, I mean, the Blues only got 2 goals again in another loss to a division rival. The Blues now 0-4 against Central teams this year and have been outscored by quite a bit. So if you look at the last 7 games, the Blues have been outscored 29-14. That's 15 goals. As I said, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And you can't chalk it all up to injuries either. When you're not scoring any more than they are, 1 or 2 injuries doesn't explain that. And they're also giving up a lot more goals than they had been. So things are kind of falling apart. Special teams aren't good. I'm talking about in general, just haven't been very good. The goal prevention has really kind of gone south. The scoring is a huge issue. So you have to wonder about the state of the Blues and what the upside is and what we can expect from them. They're technically, as I mentioned yesterday in a follow-up today, I mean, technically the Blues are not that bad shape as far as like a wild card spot in the Western Conference, but there's a lot of teams all piled up. And there's some teams they would have to jump. So even though they're not out by that many points, I think it's 4. I hope I have that right. I apologize if I wrote down the wrong number. But the point is they're right in the race. So it's not like they're blown out of the race and there's no hope. But if you keep just kind of skating into this deep trouble, you get into this kind of rut and you're having a hard time getting out of it, you can't count on those standings, the wild card standings, staying bunched up for a long period of time. I mean, once you get to Thanksgiving and then you start to move on towards Christmas, some tough decisions have to be made about who the Blues are, where they stand, and what are the realistic possibilities of them getting a playoff spot. Then you have a come to Army meeting, and you decide what your philosophy is going to be going forward. So the Blues lose last night, and then the same night, same day. So the Boston Bruins fire Jim Montgomery. Now, as I was joking last night, I'm on Blue Sky now, by the way. You can find me. I really like Blue Sky as a social media platform. It's just calmer and more thoughtful, and people, it's a good vibe, good positive vibe. So you can find me there. But I was pointing out how the Blues lost again and then made them 1-5-1 in their last 7 games. And I said, in other news, the Bruins fired Jim Montgomery. So one of my friends on Blue Sky said, are you trying to drop a message there? Are you trying to drop a hint? And I said, you're accusing me of connecting the dots, that the Blues are awful right now and they're getting worse instead of better. So you think I'm connecting the dots because the Bruins fired Jim Montgomery, who was a very popular assistant coach here in St. Louis, and he started off his career, his first time in the National Hockey League was with the St. Louis Blues back in 1993-94. He even was a player coach for the Missouri River Otters in his last year as an active player. And in between jobs at one point, he was helping Barrett Jackman coach a Pee Wee League team here in St. Louis. He married a St. Louis woman. They have a home in St. Louis. It's all set up for, I don't know what, but it's all set up. since he got fired by the Bruins. So I said to my friend, I said, so you really think I'm connecting the dots here, huh? I said, oh, I would never do a thing like that. And then I used an emoji that had the devil. In other words, it's like, yeah, I guess that's exactly what I'm doing. Listen, I feel guilty about that. Drew Bannister's had 20 games this year, and he's had a lot of things going against him that were out, were not within his control. Okay. I'm just trying to be a little fair to the guy because I think talking about a coaching change is unfair to him, given it's 20 games into the season and he just signed a 2-year contract last summer. And he's had 74 games as the Blues coach after replacing Craig Berube last year. And the Blues were pretty good. They were better under Bannister last year than they were before Berube was fired. Sorry. And his overall record as a Blues coach is 38-30-6. And given the state of the Blues and some of the chaos and the injuries and roster reshuffling and all, it's not like it's an embarrassment to be 38-30-6 if you're Drew Bannister. He coached well enough and earned enough respect to where Doug Armstrong gave him the job. He took the interim label off and gave him a 2-year contract. However, let's also be adults here, okay? The Blues look bad. They look real bad. Basically every area of the team right now is not good. The goaltending has been off, but only because those guys are under tremendous duress all the time, because the Blues are getting outplayed most of the time. And it's not easy to be the savior every single night. So every part of the team's just not looking real good, or it's not looking good, period. And so how long do you go on with this? I think that's a legitimate question. And the other thing is, I would say we need to be adults here, right? Because the conventional wisdom, the very popular, I would even say prevailing view last summer or late last spring, when Doug Armstrong was trying to figure out what to do about the coaching job. Do you stay with Bannister? Do you open it up and go searching for another coach? Which Armstrong said he would do, and which he apparently did, but he circled back to Drew Bannister, which left some fans and media, rightfully so, theorizing that, well, he was waiting to see if the Bruins fired Jim Montgomery, because if the Brewers would have lost in the first round of in the postseason last season, I mean, all the Boston writers and broadcasters and pretty much us were saying, well, Montgomery is going to get sacked, because you remember the previous year, his first year as the Bruins coach, or maybe it was I don't know what it was, first year or not. Sorry, I apologize. But the previous season, 2 seasons ago, they won the President's Trophy. They had an amazing record, just an amazing record. In fact, I think it set some records. And what was it? 65. Just a crazy good record. 65-12-5 in the 22-23 season. 135 points. Won the President's Trophy, but they had a 3-1 lead in the first round against Florida, and they lost 3 in a row. And the best regular season team in the league by far got the boot. And Montgomery went from being a heralded coach to someone who entered last season on thinner ice. And so they fell behind in that opening round series. If they had lost it, most people, at least who follow the Bruins, thought that would have been it. He would have gotten sacked. So Doug Armstrong, if anybody was theorizing, as I think I did and many of us did, well, he's just kind of wait and see what happens on the Jim Montgomery front. And the Bruins are keeping Montgomery. They kept Montgomery. In fact, Don Sweeney, the general manager who fired him yesterday, told reporters Wednesday in Boston, told them that, I didn't really want to fire him. In fact, earlier this year, I offered him a contract extension. So people would probably want to know, well, why would the Bruins fire him? You have to ask Don Sweeney, because he apparently doesn't know why either, because he claims he offered him a contract extension. Now he's firing him. And the Bruins are underachieving in a major way. They're underachieving in a major way, and we'll get back to that in a minute. But the fact is, if Montgomery would have been available, I think Doug Armstrong, I think we're all reasonably confident it's not hardly going out on a limb to say that Doug Armstrong would have hired Jim Montgomery to come here to St. Louis, because Jim Montgomery's got St. Louis Blues roots. His wife is from St. Louis. They've got 4 kids. And he told Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic, my good friend and just a great hockey writer. Let me find this note. When the Blues hired Jim Montgomery to join Craig Berube's staff, and, this would have been, they hired him on September the 16th, 2020. He and his wife were talking about what options to take. He had some other job offers after getting fired in Dallas because he had alcohol-related problems. He went through rehab, but for a while, nobody would touch him. They didn't trust the situation. He apparently did a couple of things, nothing criminal, but really embarrassed the Dallas Stars. And even though he was a very good coach there, they fired him because they felt they had to. They didn't think that he was under control. Well, but Jim Montgomery turned his life around, and he, from what have read and what has been reported and what I have learned about it, making some calls, I mean, Jim Montgomery's life is in great shape. I mean, he makes sure to stay with the program. He makes sure to be diligent and on top of it. He has got a great support cast, not just family, but friends, other people that have had this problem. He's got a whole network of people there that will be there for him if he should ever get into some kind of temptation. And Jim Montgomery's life is actually really good, except for the fact that he, got fired again. And this time it was for hockey reasons. But anyway, Jim Montgomery and his friend Doug Armstrong, and his friend Craig Berube, everyone in the league was kind of like, well, we don't know what to do here. Do we trust him? Well, the Blues wanted him back. They wanted him. Not wanted him back as a coach because he wasn't a coach. They wanted him back, the place where he began his NHL playing career and where he laid down some roots. And so anyway, Jeremy Rutherford was telling the story in a story that he wrote after the Blues hired Jim Montgomery as an assistant, gave him a 2-year contract, and he was here 2 years before the Bruins hired him away in the summer of 2022, June of 2022, I believe. So anyway, they did have some other offers. There was a chance to go back and coach in college because he was an excellent, in fact, National Coach of the Year before he was hired by the Dallas Stars. Jim Montgomery won the National Coach of the Year as the hockey coach at the University of Denver, which is an outstanding program, has been for a long time. He got them to the Frozen Four 2 years in a row. The second year they got to the championship game and lost, but he was voted the National Coach of the Year. And so I think Denver and some other places in college hockey would always have a job for him when he was personally ready to do it. But in the NHL, they were a little nervous. A lot of teams were nervous. If it was just about the record, they would have hired him. So anyway, he did have some other offers, maybe not in the NHL, maybe a couple. I don't know that for a fact. I couldn't find that for sure. So he and his wife were talking about this, and they said, well, St. Louis, or, go back to college hockey here, or I can maybe I can probably take an assistant coaching job in the NHL here at some other place. And this is what Jim Montgomery told Jeremy Rutherford of The Athletic, quote, St. Louis won. For our kids to have cousins to play with, the decision to come here for our kids' benefit was really the deciding factor. So we drove our 2 cars here, plopped right in, and started to live. So his kids were incredibly happy to come home to St. Louis. I know that he was in Dallas, and I know they spent part of their relatively brief time in their childhood in Dallas. But his kids wanted. His wife was going to support him no matter what he did, but his kids were up front and back. Dad, we want to go back to St. Louis. And so they were. Jeremy Rutherford described a car ride that as Jim Montgomery relayed to him about how excited his family was about the possibility of returning to St. Louis before the job was officially offered. But St. Louis was very much in the works, just as a matter of time. And he went through a lot of interviews with Tom Stillman and Doug Armstrong and Craig Berube and others. I mean, and so everybody was on the same page. So this is also from Jeremy Rutherford's story. And this is why I'm setting up a major point, which is that, Jim Montgomery will have a chance to coach at any number of places. He will be in demand. I'm reading some lists this morning. I'll read you one of the lists as far as the Blues are concerned. But anyway, a lot of people are linking him to the Blues or one of several other teams for his next stop. So anyway, and I apologize because I'm going like back and forth. That's why I should start scripting these things maybe. So this is this Jim Montgomery telling Jeremy Rutherford about when they decided as a family, yep, we're going to go back home to St. Louis. We're going to be assistant coach to Coach Craig Berube in the Blues. Are you happy? We got our house there, all your cousins there, your aunts and uncles. We're going home. Jim Montgomery said, quote, my 11-year-old JP jumped up, started screaming and crying, and he hugged me. Montgomery told JR. Quote, it was euphoria to celebrate like that as a family. I thank my wife for her incredible belief in me. And I told her that this would not have happened without her. And she said, and I have to censor this, she said, BS, you're a great coach. So they were very, very happy to be on the way home to St. Louis. Now, you can't turn down another head coaching job when it comes your way. And the Boston job was a terrific job. It was absolutely a terrific job. And so he signed on there. He left the Blues after 2 seasons. The Blues missed him because, among other things, he was such a valuable assistant. He was so popular with everybody, so respected by everybody. The players respected him. They loved him. The staff loved him. I mean, Jim Montgomery was a highly, highly admired and respected individual in his 2 years behind the bench with Craig Berube. And it was a great fit in a city that he and his wife love. And he left for a good reason. And again, it's not like the guy was a bum in Boston. Was that first round playoff upset the year they won the President's Trophy when they blew a 3-1 lead, lost to the Panthers? Is that bad? Yeah, it's bad. We've seen it happen here in St. Louis with some pretty esteemed head coaches, right? And the way that the Bruins kind of fell apart this year left their general manager very unsettled. So this was the classic NHL thing, blame the coach. You gotta fire the coach because you can't fire all the players. You see all those hats that I have? And there's more there. I got some on the floor either. My vintage cap collection. This is the old St. Louis Stars of the Negro Leagues, by the way. You see all those hats? I change hats. I don't even change hats as quickly as NHL teams change coaches, okay? That's how ridiculous it is. So when I hear that a coach gets fired, what my reaction is? It's, what took him so long? Because usually, you're probably secure. I'm exaggerating here. You're probably secure for about 2 weeks before someone's starting to think, the players are starting to revolt or whatever. It's amazing. It's amazing how disposable National Hockey League coaches are. I mean, the league is crazy. It's just flat out crazy. And I've always made this point. There are other sports where the players have reputations, right? Oh, these guys, they're conniving and they're this and they're that. And you got to parent them and you got to treat them like they're little gods or they're going to turn on you and they don't have any respect. There isn't a league in professional sports, the 5, and I'm throwing the MLS in there. There isn't a league in North American professional sports, five major leagues, where the players are more ruthless, more conniving, and more aggressive about scheming to get coaches fired. These guys are all great, all of them. They know how to get coaches fired, and they don't hesitate to put that plan into effect. And yet they got the reputation. Oh, these NHL guys, they're the highest character guys in sports, Bernie. Don't you know that? They're hockey work ethic. They're people of character. Well, why are NHL players everywhere? Why do they turn on a coach like that? And then their next thing they do is they come up with a scheme. Well, we got to get rid of this guy. You know what to do, boys, eh? So I always love this because NHL players got this wonderful reputation among, frankly, naive fans. No, they're actually pretty diabolical. When they want a coach gone, they know exactly what to do to get the coach gone. And again, The coaches come and go more than these hats that I wear and change off on, right? So that was a mess in Boston, but most of it was not Jim Montgomery's doing. I mean, Don Sweeney it had a lot of things that are now being second and third guest and first guest at the time. I don't know if I even want to get into that. I want to continue to talk about St. Louis. So we know that Doug Armstrong would have hired Jim Montgomery if Jim Montgomery was available. He would have hired him instead of Drew Bannister. I think even Drew Bannister knows that, and I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, nor should it be, because it was such an obvious thing. So if you're Doug Armstrong, like I said, on the surface, it's unfair. It's unfair. Do you really sack this coach so soon into his first year under contract as the coach rather than an interim? 20 games in, had Robert Thomas out of the lineup for 11 games, haven't had Philip Broberg. I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to give you the case of why it would be unfair. And I do feel a little bad talking about it because, after all, the Blues do have a coach right now. And I don't know what they're going to be telling reporters. I don't think they're going to tell them anything, because it's not like, well, yeah, we got to see how it goes. But Jim knows that we like him. You know, no, you're not going to hear that. You'll hear some kind of like denials that might be non-denial denials. We have a coach, and we hired Drew Bannister for a reason. And it's been a little tough, but a lot of these things are not his fault. And, you know, we all collectively have to pull together and figure a way out of this. So you're going to hear stuff like that. And I wouldn't expect anything else. But Doug Armstrong loves the coach. I mean, Jimmy Montgomery. He loves Jim Montgomery. And Jim Montgomery's got all these Blues roots and St. Louis roots and family roots here and family ties here. He's got a home here. I'm repeating myself. So if he's going to go anywhere, if the Blues have the job for him, he would take the job. Why would he want to go somewhere else where he's not appreciated? We know him in St. Louis, right? And he did an excellent job with the Stars until personal demons took over. He led Boston and he hadn't won there that long. In one of the years, he led them into a 65-12-5 record, 35 points. Then the general manager decided to screw with the roster and make some signings and trades that haven't worked out. And then he was the guy that had to get on Pasternak and get on Marchand and get on some other players because they weren't playing well. So then the players turned on him. It's exactly how it works in the NHL. Well, boys, time to get the coach fired. So that's why I said we should be adults here. It's understandable. I don't feel guilty. I feel guilty because Drew Bannister is a good man, and this is his first head coaching opportunity. But this is a pretty cutthroat business, and coaches are disposable. And we'll never forget. It was funny how the Blues, Doug Armstrong decided, well, we just got to part ways with Andy Murray. The players have tuned him out, blah blah blah. So we're going to bring in a younger coach that they can relate to, a guy that's in the minors. We're going to bring in Davis Payne, right? So Davis Payne came in, and no disrespect to him, fine man, but it was a disaster. It just wasn't going to work, and it didn't work. So then that's when Army reached out to his old friend Ken Hitchcock, and Hitchcock took over. So maybe this is unfair, or maybe this is not entirely a perfect match, but I look at Drew Bannister in a way that the people making the decisions for the Blues looked at Davis Payne after a while, like, well, this just isn't working out. It was a fine man, but it's just not working out. So is the current coach of the Blues, Drew Bannister, is he destined to become Davis Payne too? Doug Armstrong had Ken Hitchcock in the bullpen. Pardon me, mixing sports. When it started to get really wobbly with Davis Payne, and clearly the players didn't care, right? He knew he had a guy in the bullpen he could summon to St. Louis and take over, right? And Ken Hitchcock's a Hall of Fame coach, and Ken Hitchcock didn't get the Blues to the promised land while he was the coach here, but boy, were they really, really outstanding for a long time. But wherever Hitch has gone in his career, he usually burns out the players after a while, and then it's time to go. It's got a certain shelf life. But I do think this analogy fits because, again, Davis Payne to Ken Hitchcock. Drew Bannister, and you got, if you want him, you got Jim Montgomery in the bullpen. You could even say he's warming up, right? So for all of us to ignore that is kind of childish because it's happened before. And for us to ignore the strong bond between Armstrong and Montgomery and all of the goodwill that Jim Montgomery built here during his time as a coach, assistant coach to Craig Berube, everybody in the place loved him. He's out there in the bullpen if you want to bring him in. And if you don't bring him in soon, he's going to have other opportunities. And listen, I've gone 25 minutes, but I think it's an important story. So let me read you what The Athletic had to say when they were writing about the possible next stops for Jim Montgomery. Thank you, as I had to go through my papers. Let me read this verbatim quote. The Blues are the clear-cut favorite to be Montgomery's next employer. Montgomery broke into the NHL as a player with the Blues in 93-94. He has a relationship with Blues general manager Doug Armstrong. On September 16, 2020, Armstrong took a chance on Montgomery following his sacking from the Stars as an assistant coach, brought him in to assist Craig Berube. Montgomery helped the Blues transition from a defense-first team to a go-go attack. That's true. They also had a great power play when Monty was assistant coach here. Montgomery gets along well with Pavel Buchnevich, who was struggling for traction this season. He's also helped Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou become go-to offensive players. I agree with that. His wife, Emily Montgomery, is from St. Louis. The family still has a home in the area. And then the Athletic began talking about all the problems that the Blues were having. So the writer was covering the Bruins said, hey, if we look at his next stops, clearly St. Louis is the most likely place. I've seen other versions of that written nationally, North America, and that seems to be a pretty popular view. He's destined to take over in St. Louis. Is that fair to Drew Bannister? No, it's not fair. Does Drew Bannister have the type of contract where if you have to eat it, it's going to cause serious financial distress? No, that it won't do that. So this can be done. It's just a matter of two things for Doug Armstrong. How long, he's sort of waiting on two fronts. If he's not going to do this right away within the next week or so, he's sort of gambling a little bit on two fronts, right? Number one, the longer he keeps Bannister, he's making a bet in effect that Bannister's going to get this thing turned around and he'll still be the coach. So I'm going to invest some time in him. It's because it's not fair, and I think he can get this thing going. So that's his first gamble. The second gamble is how much time before Jim Montgomery, in effect, says, "Well, the Blues don't want to hang. They don't want to hang Bannister out to dry," and I get that. So I need to talk to some other teams because other teams are asking for me to come talk to them about taking over in their building. And some of those teams that have been speculated include Detroit, Pittsburgh, Nashville, Montreal, although Canadian fans, they were all over the Athletic guy for suggesting Montreal would be another likely spot. They said there's no way that the Canadians are going to sack Martin St. Louis this soon, relatively soon. I mean, the guy's like a French-Canadian icon. But he will have some. Monty will have some other opportunities. So, how long does Doug Armstrong wait to see if Bannister can get the team back on track, and how long does he wait before it becomes a real possibility that Jim Montgomery's just going to say, "Well, I bet I need to get on with my life," so let's go talk to, say, the Red Wings about their job or whatever. So it could be cut and dry. It's not quite cut and dry. I think there'll be a little time. I could be wrong. It's an unpleasant business. The NHL in particular is just a brutal, brutal, brutal place for head coaches. Look at Craig Berube getting fired, right? So if you can fire Craig Berube, the only coach in the history of the franchise to win a Stanley Cup, if you can fire him and bring in Drew Bannister and then keep Drew Bannister Craig Berube, Drew Bannister. You go from Stanley Cup champion coach to a guy just starting out. You were willing to do that? If you're willing to do that, because one guy was a legend, he'll always be a legendary coach in St. Louis because of winning the Stanley Cup in 2019. So if you're willing to kick him out of the building to bring in, frankly, a no-name coach, well, why would you feel ashamed or like you were being evil or something if you kick out the no-name coach to bring in a guy, Jim Montgomery, who's really, really done some very good things as a leader in the National Hockey League, including a 659 points percentage as a head coach? Yeah, I mean, if you're going to tell Craig Berube, I know you want a Stanley Cup coach, but get out. I think you can do the same with Drew Bannister, right? Because it's not like you would boot him out to bring in another no-name or some guy just starting out who you're not really entirely sold on. I repeat, and I know I'm repeating myself, but you would have, the Blues absolutely would have hired Jim Montgomery if he had been available at that time, but the timing wasn't right. Now the timing makes him available, and it's not that much longer after they thought he might be available back in the spring. It's not like it's not like 2 or 3 years have passed. I mean, this is all still pretty fresh. But yeah. If you're willing to, if you got to sack to fire Craig Berube to bring in Drew, who I'm thinking you got the sack to make a change and swap out the low key unestablished coach for someone that you have a strong personal and professional working relationship with, and that's Jim Montgomery. All right. I've gone long enough. Thanks for hanging with me if you did, and appreciate you very much. Please leave your comments what you think about this. I'm Bernie Miklasz. I'll be back to Thursday morning with some more videos for you here on the Bernie Miklasz channel. Thank you.